going to throw me out. You guys just okay. What's going on? Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Study Time with the Word. Last week we looked at building spiritual capacity. This week we are going to be looking at dangers of wrong or evil association. Dangers of wrong and evil association. So today we're going to be looking at the part 1. We're going to be looking at scriptural examples as to better explain the dangers around wrong or evil association. So today being Monday, we're going to be looking at the story of Amnon and Jonadab. Let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 13. 2 Samuel chapter 13. It's a long read, but I will just break it intermittently so that we can have a full story of what it was all about. 2 Samuel 13:1. I read from 1 to 5. It says, "Now David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so obsessed with Tamar that he became ill. She was a virgin, and Amnon thought he could never have her. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab," meaning that Jonadab was his cousin and friend. "He was the son of David's brother Shimea. One day, Jonadab said to Amnon, 'What's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so dejected morning after morning?' So Amnon told him, 'I am in love with Tamar, my brother, Absalom's sister.' 'Well,' Jonadab said, 'I'll tell you what to do.' See the counsel. 'Go back to bed and pretend you are ill. When your father comes to see you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she prepares it as you watch and feeds you with her own hands.' So long story made short, that happened. Amnon raped Tamar, and let's look at what verses 30 to 35. Amnon raped Tamar. Absalom found out about it. It was a very terrible experience for Tamar, considering the fact that she was a virgin. Then look at verse 21 first of all. "When King David heard what had happened, he was very angry. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon," that's verse 22, "about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister." Now let's look at verses 30 to 33 and 35. As they were on their way back to Jerusalem. Now, Absalom organized a feast so as to get the king's sons to attend. And his target was to kill Amnon, which he did. Now, let's look at that for a second. Verse 28, Absalom told his men, "Wait until Amnon gets drunk." Now, this was 2 years after this rape incident. "Wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who has given the command. Take courage and do it." So at Absalom's signal, they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. As they were on their way back to Jerusalem, this report reached David. "Absalom has killed all the king's sons. Not one is left alive." The king got up, tore his robe, and threw himself on the ground. His advisors also tore their clothes in horror and sorrow. But just then, Jonadab, this same Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimea, arrived and said, Don't believe that all the king's sons have been killed. It was only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon raped his sister Tamar. No, my lord the king, your sons aren't all dead. It was only Amnon." That was Jonadab giving the story. And looking at verses 25, "Look," Jonadab told the king, "there they are now. The king's sons are coming, just as I have said." Now, in all of this, we also must take note of David's negligence, okay? Because he, as much as he was angry, he still didn't act. He was his inactions towards the situation also, I'm sure, made it so worse. Let's look at verses 21 and 22. After hearing what happened, what did David do about Amnon raping Tamar? Verses 21 and 22. When King David heard what had happened, he was angry. He was angry. He didn't do anything. And though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. So David, he didn't do anything about it. So I personally don't see David as a wonderful father. I don't see him. We see a lot of rebellion in his household, which I believe was as a result of his orchestration or his plan to have killed Uriah and took over Bathsheba, and the sin of lust and adultery. So now let's look at what we can get from this experience. Okay, first and foremost, Jonadab is a cousin to Amnon and also a friend. We see him giving Amnon a counsel that killed him, that killed Amnon. Where was Jonadab in all of this? Even when things turned sour, he was still the one. He was still the tattletale. He was still telling the story. Oh, they are not. It's only Amnon they killed, though. But he never mentioned his part. He never mentioned how and what led to all of that. Like he never mentioned the role that he played in this division. Okay, so what do we learn from all of this? Let's point out the danger discovered in this experience now. Number one, we see his wicked advice causing a disastrous chain of events. We see his wicked counsel in verses 3 to 5 that caused a disastrous chain of events. So it's important that we pay attention to who we listen to and who we give our ears to, the kind of counsel that we receive and we're running with. You know, when he was giving this advice to Amnon, Amnon never imagined that it would bring about his own death. And we see an Absalom also, 2 whole years, ganging up. It took him a lot of planning to put that feast together, a royal feast, a banquet. And then he invited David, knowing that David would not come, convinced David to invite Amnon because his intention was to kill Amnon. Where did all this begin from? From a counsel given by Jonadab. It began with his lustful desires, and then Jonadab giving him a counsel to satisfy that lust and flesh, which ended up killing him. Now we see that in verses 3 to 5. Then number 2, we also see pretense and deceit. Let's look at verses 6 to 10. Verses 6 to 10 says, so Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. And when the king came to see him, Amnon asked him, please let my sister Tamar come and cook my favorite dish as I watch. Then I can eat it from her own hands. So David agreed and sent Tamar to Amnon's house to prepare some food for him. We see pretense and deceit. We also see that in the place of Absalom, planning a feast, a get-together to kill Amnon. All of this, wrong association, evil association. And then looking at number 3, we see lust being encouraged. We see lust. We see flesh being indulged. You know, Jonadab was helping Amnon to satisfy his lustful pleasure. If he had said that to someone who was God-fearing and reverences God, the person know it better to help him out of that lust. But this one was there to just there to aid Amnon, and then told him how to satisfy lust, not knowing that there are consequences to all of this. And Amnon also, not knowing this, see the way that he died, killed by his own step or half brother. Then number 4, we see Tamar's rape. We see rape. You know, most times when you find uncontrollable lusts or fleshly desires, you see all sorts of vices. We see rape, all beginning from a desire. And then looking at verses 11 to 14. Let's look at that for verse 13. When Amnon had told Tamar of his intention, she said, no, my brother, she cried, don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. Such wicked things aren't done in Israel. Verse 13. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be one of the greatest fools in Israel. Please, just speak to the king about it, and he will let you marry me. But Amnon wouldn't listen to her. And since he was stronger than she was, he raped her. And then let's look at the next point here. hate and rejection. We see hate and rejection. And looking at that in verses 15, then suddenly, after the rape experience, suddenly Amnon's love turned to hate. And he hated her even more than he had loved her. Get out of here, he snarled at her. We see that. So we see hate and rejection. Then number 6, we see murder in verses 28 and 29. We see Amnon being killed. We see Absalom giving the instruction, don't worry, go ahead. I've given the order, kill him. Wait for him to get drunk and then kill him. We see murder. Then number 7, all this brought about Absalom's rebellion. We see that in 2 Samuel chapter 15. Looking at the entire chapter to the next. It brought about his rebellion because after that experience, he went on exile. Are you with me? He went to stay with his grandparents, whose child was also a king in another territory. So we see Absalom's rebellion, and then lastly we see offense. Verses 23, amazing. Note that Absalom didn't confront Amnon about this experience. Didn't ask him, why did you do what you did? As my sister, you did that too. Probably they would have just quarreled here and there. He did not confront him. He didn't ask him. Look at verses 23. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep was being sheared at Baal-Hazor near Ephraim, Absalom invited all the king's sons to come to a feast. 2 years after that experience, 2 years after that encounter, 2 years after the rape. And he bore an offense for 2 years. What was going through his mind in that 2 years? Was he relating with Amnon? When he saw Amnon, how did he feel? So we see what Jonadab in his counsel and his association with Amnon, we see all this happening. Now, what's our counsel in all that we've said today? Let's relate it to us now. Number 1, being related by blood doesn't mean you must relate. Being related by blood does not mean that you must relate. You don't have to be friends. The fact that Jonadab was friend to Amnon didn't mean that they needed to be friends, because I can tell you that was not his only cousin. Are you with me? So being related by blood it doesn't mean you must relate. Let's look at Matthew chapter 12 verses 50. Matthew chapter 12 verses 50. We see verses 49. Then he pointed to his disciples and said, look, these are my brothers, my mothers and brothers. Just was being told that his mother and brother was, they were looking for him. They wanted waiting for him outside and all of that. And then Jesus says what? Is it anyone who does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. That's not blood relation. That's purpose. Purpose relation. Related by purpose. Are you with me? Purpose in God. That's a bond. Are you with me? So being related doesn't mean you must relate. Then let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verses 33. It says, don't be fooled by those who say such things, for bad company corrupts good manners. Bad company. You might stay long or tarry. You might stay with a person and strongly believe that you cannot be influenced by the person. Don't be too sure. Okay? Don't be too sure. Sometimes the person might say something to you and you're not taking it at that time. But when you're away from the person, you begin to reminisce. It drops in your thoughts and you begin to think it through, think it over. Before you know it, it's settled in. Then number 2, there is nothing like small or big sin. One wrong seed can magnify into something that can be managed. What do I mean? A little leaven can leaven the whole lump. Galatians 5:9 tells us that. Don't say it's just a small thing. No, a little leaven. We see how Amnon couldn't control his desire. And then Jonadab helped him to fuel it, which brought about rape, hatred, offense, murder, rebellion, all from a desire. All from a desire. There's nothing like big or small sin. Sin is sin. So him not being able to control his fleshly and lustful desire for his sister, Tamar. Even when Tamar offered to say, okay, you know what, tell father, you can marry me. Are you with me? He still went ahead, raped her. Hatred, rejection. We see offense, we see murder. All of these from a desire. And then from a wrong association, evil association. Then number 5, What is this? What's our counsel to us? Die to flesh daily. 1 Corinthians 15:31. When Apostle Paul speaks of dying daily, Amplified Version says, I face death and die to self. Because the flesh profits nothing. Nothing. After Amnon slept with Tamar, he all of a sudden hated her twice as much. So what was there before? It wasn't love. It was lust. It wasn't love. So we see that. Profits nothing. Sometimes flesh can drive you and you just think that you're heading, you just desire to please it at all costs. And you're ready to you're ready for the consequences. You open your mind to the consequences and you're ready to let your guard down. He says, Apostle Paul tells us, die daily. Die daily. Okay? Die daily. Then number 4, flee from every appearance of evil. A person can be the evil. Run away. We have a lot of humans, a lot of demons that are working as human beings. I'm telling you. We have a lot of people who are the demonic influence in their life is something you need to run away from. Flee from every appearance of evil. Jonadab was just at the right spot at the right time. Convinced Amnon to do all that he did to his sister. And when Amnon was killed, he was the one telling the father it was Amnon that was killed. Why didn't he come to Amnon's defense? Did he really love him? Are you with me? Flee from every appearance of evil. The ones you did, persons like that, they don't really care about you. When the chiefs are down, they are the one that tell the story and they will never tell their part. They will never tell you, they will never tell people the role they played. Flee from every appearance of evil. When the chiefs are down, these persons will not be there. Then number 5, know God. Let his word guide you. Know God and let his word guide your life. Are you with me? When you receive a counsel, ensure that you are able to marry it to the word of God. So that you let his word guide your life. Then lastly, have a mind of your own. We talked about the use of the mind, I think about 2 weeks ago. Very impactful teaching. Have a mind of your own. Especially one that can discern good and evil. Jonadab may have thought he was helping Amnon, but never knew that he was destroying him. Are you with me? He may have thought he was helping him, but he never knew that he was destroying him. So have a mind of your own. Don't let any other person own your mind for you. Don't let other people own your mind. When they own your mind, they will use it to your disadvantage and to their advantage. So we've looked at the story of Amnon and Jonadab. That was a relationship that destroyed Amnon, killed him untimely, brought about rebellion in the household of David. Absalom went far away from home because of the deed, because of the murder and the things he committed. Came back and began to rebel against the father. And looking at the last verse of that, let's look at the last verse of that 2 Samuel chapter 13. David is amazing, an amazing character. Very, very amazing. Let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 13. Looking at the last verse. See. Let's look at 37 to 38. That's the last 2 verses. And David mourned many days for his son Amnon. Absalom fled to his grandfather, Tamar, son of Amihud, the king of Geshur. He stayed there in Geshur for 3 years. And King David, now reconciled to Amnon's death, longed to be reunited with his son Absalom. So we see David, a father who didn't handle his home affairs properly. We see David, he was king, but he didn't handle his home affairs. This happened, and what did you do? Absalom took law into his hands. And we see Amnon dying untimely. We see Absalom rebelling against the father. We see Jonadab, the one who gave the counsel, orchestrated all of this, and still Amnon died and he moved on. So be careful who you are associating with. Okay? We're looking at the dangers of wrong and evil associations. Some of us are in associations that are not helping us, not profiting us. You know, some of these associations may not, you can tell beforehand that this thing is not heading anywhere. Seek godly associations. Seek to be around people that let God put the right position the right persons around you. Let the word guide your life so that you don't easily stray from the truth. And then when the word guides your life, you're able to discern evil and good, light and darkness, and you're able to make a better choice and to walk in it. I believe we are blessed by today's edition of Study Time with the Word. We talked about the story of Amnon and Jonadab. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at also another interesting story, because we are going to be drawing out lessons from this story. I know that every one of us will fall, one of the stories will fall into one of this categories, either in marriage, either in relationship or courtship, either in friends and family. Today we talked about friend and family. Tomorrow we'll be talking about another interesting story in the scripture as well, and we're going to be drawing lessons and counsels so that we can be able to apply what we're learning. Okay, I'm Hilda. I'll be here again tomorrow 9 a.m. for another edition of Study Time with the Word. God bless you.